This morning you stepped into a shower, turned a single handle, and stood under clean hot water for almost no effort at all. 200,000 years ago, that same few minutes of clean water would have meant a walk to a river, a careful check for predators, and no guarantee the water was even safe to touch your skin. No soap, no shampoo, no towel waiting on a rail, no certainty that the water wouldn't make you sick. For most of human history, staying clean was never a routine. It was a decision, made new every single day, weighed against real danger. You have never once had to ask yourself whether washing your body was worth the risk of being eaten. Ancient humans asked that question constantly, and the answer was not always yes. Imagine going 3 weeks without a shower, without a sink, without anything you would recognize as soap, and somehow still finding a way to survive, to bond, to stay healthy enough to hunt and gather and raise children. That was ordinary life for tens of thousands of years. It was not dirty by accident. It was dirty by necessity, shaped by rivers that ran cold, seasons that turned deadly, and a world that offered no easy answers. And yet, ancient humans were not filthy animals stumbling through existence unaware of grime. They noticed the smell of their own bodies. They noticed the sting of a wound left uncleaned. They noticed that some people who bathed regularly seemed to survive illness better than those who did not. Hygiene, in some rough and instinctive form, existed long before anyone wrote the word down. The story of how they solved this problem, with nothing but rivers, ash, fat, and stone, says something remarkable about human ingenuity. Long before soap as we know it existed, humans were already experimenting with cleaning themselves. Early Homo sapiens living near lakes and rivers in Africa likely bathed simply by wading into the water and using their hands to scrub away dirt, sweat, and blood. Water alone does surprisingly well at loosening grime, and archaeologists believe this simple act of full body washing was one of the earliest hygiene behaviors humans developed. But water was not always available, and it was not always safe. Stagnant pools bred parasites. Cold rivers in winter could kill through exposure long before dirt ever could, so ancient humans developed a second layer of defense, one built from the land itself. Sand and fine ash became early abrasives, rubbed against the skin to physically scrape away built-up oil and dead skin the way a modern exfoliating scrub does today. In dry, hot climates like parts of Africa and the Middle East, people used desert sand for exactly this purpose, working it across the arms, legs, and torso before rinsing with whatever water they had. Ash from cooking fires carried something even more useful hidden inside it. When ash mixes with fat or oil, it creates a rough, basic form of saponification, the same chemical reaction that produces true soap. Some anthropologists believe early humans stumbled onto this by accident, noticing that greasy hands rubbed with fire ash came away cleaner than hands rubbed with water alone. This accidental discovery would eventually be refined by later civilizations into the first deliberate soap recipes, but its roots reach back to campfires tens of thousands of years old. Plants offered another solution entirely. Certain plants, including soapwort, yucca root, and horse chestnut, contain natural compounds called saponins that create a light foamy lather when crushed and mixed with water. Ancient peoples across different continents independently discovered these plants and used them to wash bodies, hair, and even clothing long before any concept of commercial soap existed. In parts of the Americas, indigenous communities used crushed yucca root as both shampoo and body wash, valuing it for how it cleans skin without stripping it painfully dry. In the Mediterranean, soapwort grew wild along riverbanks and was gathered specifically for its cleansing properties, sometimes called nature's own soap by later herbalists studying its chemistry. Oil played a surprising role too. Rather than avoiding oil, many ancient peoples used it deliberately, rubbing animal fat or plant oil across the skin, letting it sit briefly, and then scraping it away with a blunt tool. This scraping tool, known much later to the Greeks and Romans as a strigil, worked on a principle far older than either civilization. The oil would loosen dirt, sweat, and dead skin cells, binding them together, and the scraping motion would lift all of it away in one pass, leaving skin cleaner than water alone could manage. Simple bone tools, smooth stones, and even shaped wood likely served this same purpose long before metal strigils were ever forged. Hair presented its own unique challenge. Without shampoo, ancient humans relied on a mixture of natural oils, occasional washing with plant-based cleansers, and in many cultures, deliberate oiling to keep hair from becoming brittle and matted. Some groups used animal fat sparingly on the hair and scalp, both to protect against harsh sun and to make lice, a near universal problem in ancient life, easier to comb out. Lice were such a persistent issue that fine-tooth combs carved from bone or wood appear throughout the archaeological record, some dating back tens of thousands of years, proof that grooming against parasites was a constant, deliberate task. Teeth were not ignored either. Chewing on certain fibrous twigs, later formalized into what are known as chew sticks in some cultures, helped scrape plaque from teeth and freshen breath, using nothing but the natural abrasiveness of frayed plant fiber. Some groups even used powdered charcoal, rubbed directly onto the teeth, exploiting its mild abrasive and absorbent properties in a method not entirely unlike modern charcoal toothpaste trends. Beyond the physical mechanics of cleaning, hygiene carried deep social weight. Grooming was rarely a solitary act, picking through a companion's hair, removing lice, checking skin for wounds. This was social bonding as much as it was practical cleanliness, strengthening trust and cooperation within small, tightly knit groups. Anthropologists studying both ancient human behavior and modern primate troops note striking similarities, suggesting that mutual grooming may be one of the oldest continuous social rituals in the human lineage, stretching back millions of years before modern humans even existed. Smell mattered too, in ways that went beyond simple cleanliness. Certain plants and resins were crushed and rubbed onto the skin, not just to mask odor but to signal health, status, or readiness for social and reproductive life. Long before perfume existed as a luxury product, humans were already using fragrant plants instinctively, understanding on some level that scent communicated something about the body wearing it. Disease shaped hygiene behavior in ways ancient people could not fully explain, but clearly recognized through observation. Communities living near clean flowing water and practicing regular washing appear, in some archaeological and anthropological studies, to have suffered fewer skin infections and parasitic illnesses than those in more stagnant, unwashed conditions. Without any concept of germs, ancient humans built rules and taboos around cleanliness anyway, treating certain water sources as forbidden, certain wounds as requiring immediate washing, certain behaviors as simply unclean, long before any scientific reasoning could explain exactly why. This is one of the most striking parts of the story. Ancient humans built functioning hygiene systems, refined over countless generations, entirely through trial, observation, and the slow accumulation of survival knowledge, without ever understanding the biology behind why any of it worked. They did not know about bacteria. They did not know about saponification on a molecular level. They simply noticed what kept people healthier, what smelled better, what felt cleaner, and they repeated it, generation after generation, until it became custom, then tradition, then quiet, unspoken law. Climate forced enormous variation in how hygiene was practiced across the ancient world. In freezing northern regions, communities could not simply wade into a river for a wash without risking death from cold exposure within minutes. Instead, some cold climate peoples developed early versions of sweat bathing, heating stones in a fire and pouring water over them inside an enclosed shelter, producing steam that opened pores and loosened dirt without ever requiring full submersion in icy water. Arctic and subarctic groups sometimes used urine as a cleaning agent, an idea that sounds shocking today but made practical sense at the time, since stale urine contains ammonia, a genuinely effective degreasing compound still recognized by chemists now. Urine was used to treat hides, clean wool, and even wash hands in some documented traditional practices, precisely because it worked, regardless of how unpleasant it sounds to modern ears. In hot, arid regions, the opposite problem existed. Water was so scarce that washing the entire body daily was simply not possible, so communities developed careful hierarchies of cleanliness, prioritizing hands, face, and feet, the parts of the body most directly linked to disease transmission and social contact. This selective washing was not laziness, it was resource management, refined by generations who understood, without any formal science, which parts of hygiene mattered most when water could not be wasted. Wound care formed another critical branch of ancient hygiene. Certain plants, including yarrow and various mosses, were pressed directly onto open wounds, and modern research has since confirmed that many of these plants carry genuine antimicrobial properties. Honey, when available, was smeared onto injuries for the same reason: its low moisture content and natural acidity creating an environment hostile to many infection-causing bacteria. a fact ancient peoples could not have explained but clearly observed working in practice. Childbirth carried its own intense hygiene demands. Communities across many ancient cultures developed specific washing rituals around birth, recognizing instinctively, long before germ theory existed, that infection risk spiked sharply during and after delivery. Older women, often the most experienced in the group, oversaw these rituals, passing down exact methods of washing, wrapping, and caring for both mother and newborn through direct demonstration rather than written instruction. Menstruation similarly required its own hygiene solutions, with many ancient cultures developing absorbent materials from moss, soft bark fiber, or woven plant matter, carefully prepared and washed for reuse. These solutions varied enormously across regions and eras, but the underlying pattern remained constant, groups finding practical, resourceful answers to problems modern convenience now solves without a second thought. Age also shaped hygiene expectations. Elderly members of ancient communities, often less physically able to travel to distant water sources, relied heavily on younger relatives to assist with washing, a quiet but essential form of intergenerational care that rarely appears in dramatic retellings of ancient life, but almost certainly happened constantly. This mutual care extended the logic of grooming beyond simple parasite removal into something closer to compassion, community members ensuring that even the weakest among them retained basic dignity and cleanliness. Modern science has since revealed something else fascinating buried inside this ancient story. Researchers studying what is now called the hygiene hypothesis suggest that early human immune systems developed in constant, low-level contact with dirt, parasites, and a wide range of microbes, and that this exposure may have actually strengthened immune resilience in ways that today's heavily sanitized environments do not replicate. In other words, the very dirt ancient humans spent so much energy trying to manage may have simultaneously been training their bodies to survive a genuinely dangerous microbial world. By the time early civilizations began writing things down, in Egypt, in Mesopotamia, in the Indus Valley, hygiene practices had already existed in some form for tens of thousands of years. Egyptians would later formalize bathing rituals, animal fat and plant oil soaps, and elaborate perfumes, but they were refining, not inventing, a system that stretched back into the deep, prehistoric past. Centuries later, the Greeks and Romans would take these scattered prehistoric habits and turn them into something monumental, building public bathhouses with heated pools, dedicated scraping rooms, and elaborate oils imported from across their empires. Yet even those grand marble bathhouses were, at their core, simply a wealthier, more organized version of a strategy that stretched back to a lone person crouched by a fire, rubbing ash into greasy palms. The soap bar sitting in your bathroom today carries an unbroken lineage stretching back to ash rubbed on greasy hands beside a prehistoric fire. The simple act of showering, something you likely did without a single thought this morning, represents the endpoint of an experiment that took hundreds of thousands of years to complete. Every ingredient you take for granted, water, plant extract, mild abrasive, gentle fat, was first tested by someone with no instructions, no guarantee of success, and no idea that their small daily choices were building the foundation of something that would outlive them by hundreds of thousands of years.